Hello, Vikings. Welcome back to week 2 of our YouTube lessons. I'm so glad you came back. This week, we will start with a quick review of last week's lesson on solving equations with variables on both sides. Then we will start a new lesson that's a little bit harder because it adds fractions to our variables and equations. So you guys know what's next. Go grab your pencil and paper. Now, put on your listening ears as we watch these videos from Khan Academy.
We have the equation 20 minus 7 times x is equal to 6 times x minus 6. And we need to solve for x. So the way I like to do these is we just like to separate the constant terms, which are the 20 and the negative 6 on one side of the equation. I'll put them on the right-hand side. And then we'll put all of the x terms, the negative 7x and the 6x, we'll put it all on the left-hand side. So to get the 20 out of the way from the left-hand side, let's subtract it. Let's subtract it from the left-hand side. But this is an equation. Anything you do to the left-hand side, you also have to do to the right-hand side. If that is equal to that, in order for them to still be equal, anything I do to the left-hand side, I have to do to the right-hand side. So I subtracted 20 from the left. Let me also subtract 20 from the right. And so the left-hand side of the equation, 20 minus 20 is just 0. That was the whole point. They cancel out. Don't have to write it down. And then I have a negative 7x, just gets carried down. Negative 7x. And then that is equal to the right-hand side of the equation. I have a 6x. I'm not adding or subtracting anything to that. But then I have a negative 6 minus 20. So if I'm already 6 below 0 on the number line and I go another 20 below that, that's at negative 26. Negative 26. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to get all of the x terms on the left-hand side. So we don't want this 6x here. So maybe we subtract 6x from both sides. So let's subtract 6x from the right, subtract 6x from the left, and what do we get? What do we get? The left-hand side, negative 7x minus 6x, that's negative 13x. Right? It's negative 7 of something minus another 6 of that something is going to be negative 13 of that something. And that is going to be equal to 6x minus 6x. That cancels out. That was the whole point behind subtracting negative 6x. And then we have just a negative 26 or minus 26, depending how you want to view it. So just negative 13x is equal to negative 26. Now, our whole goal, just to remember, is to isolate the x. And we have a negative 13 times the x here. So the best way to isolate it is if we have something times x, if we divide by that something, we'll isolate the x. So let's divide by negative 13. Now, you know by now, anything you do to the left-hand side of an equation, you have to do to the right-hand side. So we're going to have to divide both sides of the equation by negative 13. Now, what does the left-hand side become? Negative 13 times x divided by negative 13. That's just going to be x. You multiply something times x divided by the something. It's just going to be, you're just going to be left with an x. So the left-hand side just becomes an x. X is equal to negative 26 divided by negative 13. Well, that's just positive 2. Right? A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 26 divided by 13 is 2. And that is our answer. That is our answer. Now let's verify that it really works. That's the fun thing about algebra. You can always make sure that you got the right answer. So let's substitute it back into the original equation. So we have 20 minus 7 times x. X is 2. Minus 7 times 2 is equal to 6 times x. We've solved for x. It is 2 minus 6. Minus 6. So let's verify that this left-hand side really does equal this right-hand side. So the left-hand side simplifies to 20 minus 7 times 2, which is 14. 20 minus 14 is 6. That's what the left-hand side simplifies to. The right-hand side, we have 6 times 2, which is 12, minus 6. 12 minus 6 is 6. So they are indeed equal, and we did indeed get the right answer.
What a great review, right? So now that you're all warmed up, let's jump into something a little harder. This video will review how we solve equations with variables on both sides with fractions.
We have the equation 3/4 x plus 2 is equal to 3/8 x minus 4. Now, we could just, right from the get-go, solve this the way we solved everything else. Group the x terms, maybe on the left-hand side, group the constant terms on the right-hand side. But adding and subtracting fractions are messy. So what I'm going to do right from the start of this video is to multiply both sides of this equation by some number so I can get rid of the fractions. And the best number to do it by, what number is the smallest number that if I multiply both of these fractions by it, they won't be fractions anymore. They'll be whole numbers. And that smallest number is going to be 8. That smallest number is going to be 8. I'm going to multiply 8 times both sides of this equation. And you say, hey, Sal, how did you get 8? And I got 8 because I said, well, what's the least common multiple of 4 and 8? Well, the smallest number that is divisible by both 4 and 8 is 8. So when you multiply by 8, it's going to get rid of the fractions. And see, let's see what happens. So 8 times 3/4, that's the same thing as 8 times 3 over 4. Let me do it on the side over here. That's the same thing as 8 times 3 over 4, which is equal to 8 divided by 4 is just 2. So it's 2 times 3, which is 6. So the left-hand side becomes 8 times 3/4 x is 6x. And then 8 times 2 is 16. You have to remember, when you multiply both sides or a side of an equation by a number, you multiply every term by that number. So you have to distribute the 8. So the left-hand side is 6x plus 16 is going to be equal to 8 times 3/8. That's pretty easy. The 8's cancel out, and you're just left with 3x. And then 8 times -4 is -32. And now we've cleaned up the equation a good bit. Now the next thing, let's try to get all the x terms on the left-hand side and all the constant terms on the right. So let's get rid of this 3x from the right. Let's subtract 3x from both sides to do it. That's the best way I can think of getting the 3x, getting rid of the 3x from the right. The left-hand side of this equation, 6x minus 3x is 3x. 6 minus 3 is 3. And then you have a plus 16 is equal to 3x minus 3x. That's the whole point of subtracting 3x, is so that they cancel out. So those guys cancel out, and we're just left with a -32. -32. Now, let's get rid of the 16 from the left-hand side. So to get rid of it, we're going to subtract 16 from both sides of this equation. Subtract 16 from both sides. The left-hand side of the equation just becomes, you have this 3x here. These 16's cancel out. You don't have to write anything. Is equal to -32 minus 16 is -48. So we have 3x is equal to -48. To isolate the x, we can just divide both sides of this equation by 3. So let's divide both sides of that equation by 3. The left-hand side of the equation, 3x divided by 3 is just an x. That was the whole point behind dividing both sides by 3. And the right-hand side, -48 divided by 3 is -16. -16. And we are done. X equals -16 is our solution. So let's make sure that this actually works by substituting to the original equation up here. And the original equation didn't have those 8's out front. So let's substitute in the original equation. We get 3/4, 3 over 4, times -16, times -16, plus 2 needs to be equal to 3/8 times -16 times -16 minus 4. Minus 4. So 3/4 of 16 is 12. And you could think of it this way. What's 16 divided by 4? It is 4. And then multiply that by 3. That's 12. It's multiplying fraction. So this is going to be a -12. So we get -12 plus 2 on the left-hand side. -12 plus 2 is -10. So the left-hand side's a -10. Let's see what the right-hand side is. We have 3/8 times -16. If you divide -16 by 8, you get -2 times 3 is a -6. So it's a -6 minus 4. -6 minus 4 is -10. So when x is equal to negative 16, it does satisfy the original equation. Both sides of the equation become negative 10. And we are done.
What a great lesson. Now it's your turn to show what you know. Let's work some problems. I will give you a few minutes to apply what you have learned and solve for the variable. If you need longer, just hit the pause button. Now let's check our answers. You should have 4/3 and -1/4. I know you got it right, so great job. Thank you for taking the time to come work with me today. I hope to see you again next week. Don't forget to subscribe to the Riverview YouTube channel so you can know when there are new videos available. And just a reminder, please stay home. We're safer at home. Have a great day.